Я буду защищать ее. Всегда. Охренеть.
Похоже, пора.
И куда ты теперь?
В Припять. Нужно с ним поговорить.
Удачной охоты, сталкер.
Ever since S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 was announced, I thought it looked really damn cool. I'm not a fan of the S.T.A.L.K.E.R franchise already, by the way. I've never played any of the original games, but when I first saw footage of S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 a couple years ago at this point, I thought it just looked atmospheric and insanely immersive. Something about being in a post-apocalyptic Chernobyl, where the setting is already creepy as hell, but then you apparently throw in a good amount of horror and science fiction in there as well. My God. Sign me up. The game just immediately had my name written all over it. I knew I was going to be there on day one. But as far as my knowledge for S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 goes, that's where it ends. I've gone radio silent on the game ever since I knew I wanted to play it. I haven't watched any of the gameplay footage. I haven't watched any of the gameplay breakdowns or any of the trailers they've been releasing. That's what I like to do whenever I'm actually hyped for a game. I like to go in as blind as possible and just let the game take me wherever the hell it's gonna take me. But I was also looking forward to this game for a completely different reason as well, because it's an Xbox game. I play most of my games on the PlayStation. I'm a PlayStation gamer primarily ever since I was a wee lad, but I'm not a foot soldier in any console war. I love experiencing what other systems have to offer. I think competition is nothing but good. And when Xbox announced their line of upcoming exclusives, S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, and Avowed, just to name a few, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't frothing at the mouth. And if I'm being completely honest with you, those exclusives seem quite a bit more appealing to me than a lot of the upcoming PlayStation exclusives, except for maybe the Wolverine. I think mostly because of the variety. Now, of course, I know there's the whole debate if these games can even be considered Xbox exclusives, with Indiana Jones coming to the PS5 a measly 6 months after its Xbox release, and I think it's safe to assume Microsoft aren't gonna stop there. Which, by the way, I wish that wasn't the case, and that's coming from a person, again, that mostly plays on the PlayStation 5. I like playing exclusive games on the console that they're designed for. I think there's a charm to it, I think there's a nostalgic factor to it, and I just like knowing that the game that I'm playing belongs on the system that I paid hundreds of dollars for. Yeah, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild or Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom would run 1,000 times better if it was released on the PlayStation 5, but I would never ever play it on the PlayStation 5, even if given the option, because it belongs on Nintendo. And again, I'm not part of any console war. I have a PS5, a PS4, a PS3, a PS2. I got an Xbox Series X. I got an Xbox One, an Xbox 360. I got a Nintendo Switch. I just love consoles, and I like that 90% of the games are available on most consoles, but the 10% that are exclusives, I like them being exclusives. But anyway, side tangent over. As of right now, when it comes to consoles, not PC, S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 is only available on the Xbox. And it just came out today, and I've been playing it for hours, which means I have a lot of thoughts that I want to share with you. So I'm going to jump into the review. I'm going to show you guys some raw gameplay, but before I do that, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, if you're new here. I talk about video games all the time on this page. Day one reviews just like this, other video game discussions as well. But enough with this introduction, let's talk about S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2. So first off, this is a first impressions review. Like I said, I've been playing it all day, but still, I've yet to see everything Stalker 2 has to show me, but with that being said, I'm gonna tell you right now, this is a game I want to dive pretty deep into. Rest in peace to all the other games I've been playing for the time being. So with that being said, in the next week or so, after I play even more, I'm most likely going to release a much longer, more in-depth review. So look forward to that if you want to continue on this Stalker 2 journey with me. And also, the next video won't be, but this review will be spoiler free. I'm going to talk about the story, but I won't get into any of the finer details, and all of the gameplay that you're seeing is from the first few hours. But anyway, with all that being said, let's talk about the story first. What's the setup? What's the premise? Like I mentioned earlier, I thought the game looked phenomenal when it came to its tone and its atmosphere, at least from what I've seen, but does it have the narrative chops? The narrative roundhouse kick to the face to make you feel like you have a reason for embracing that tone and atmosphere? I like walking around creepy post-apocalyptic landscapes and shooting bad guy NPCs and fighting horrific monsters, but I like it a lot more when I care about the reasons why I'm doing it. But anyway, you play as a dude named Skif, and he goes into a zone filled with weird anomalies, mutant monsters, and human enemies in order to use a scanner to figure out some valuable information. And he's doing so in exchange for, I guess you could say, a purpose to live, because he claims very early on that he has nowhere to go and nothing to return to. But very early on in the game, this main objective gets promptly derailed, and you find yourself essentially trapped inside the danger zone, and you're caught up in a plot that involves big groups of bad guys, evil mustache-twirling villains, and a lot of side characters you meet along the way that, more often than not, introduce you to a plethora of side stories that I myself found to be a lot more interesting than the main story, at least so far. I'm not saying the main story is bad, by the way, it's not. It just hasn't hooked me fully yet, but I can say the pieces are there. As of now, I've barely scratched the surface of the main narrative, but right now, to me, it just feels like an excuse to exist in the world other than a true reason that I care about, and for the main character to just have a somewhat believable motivation to do the things he's doing. And speaking of the main character, I don't really like him yet. He's not necessarily annoying or poorly written, he's just kind of bland and cliche like so many other first-person shooter protagonists. But I also think this might be due to the English voice dub acting. A lot of the voice actors in this game seem a little hollow and caricaturish, at least in my opinion, and again, for the English dub. I chose to use the English dub simply so I didn't have to read, so I could spend more time playing, and I could experience as much of the game as possible before recording this review. But when I go back to playing after I upload this review and I can take my time a little bit more, I'm definitely swapping back to the original voice acting. But I know that this review is starting out of the gate kind of negative, but trust me, I have really enjoyed my time with Stalker 2 so far, even though I'm not overly fond of the main character yet, and I'm not loving the main story yet. I still really love a lot of the other aspects of this game's story and the world building and its general tone and atmosphere. For example, the first couple side quests I did in this game genuinely had me invested. So many games this past year have really dropped the ball when it comes to side quests. It's like I do them on autopilot, I just turn my brain off and I couldn't care less. It's like I'm just crossing things off of a chore list, but so far, that's not the case at all with Stalker 2. One of the very first side quests that you do is just a straightforward mission where you rescue a dude from a few bandits. You walk up the road, bam bam, bad guy's dead, the end. Here's a can of tuna for your hard work. It's technically not that impressive or new. It feels like stuff we've seen and done before in so many other games, but it still, to me, felt worth doing because it felt like it had meaning and more consequence than a lot of other recent games that I've played. And the way this optional stuff is incorporated into this game and into this world makes you feel like it's worth doing and like it's not just wasting your time or there as filler or padding. Let me just kind of walk you through how this stuff is introduced to you in the game. You play through the tutorial, and then after that, you're basically set free on the world. And the moment the leash is taken off of you, you can choose to follow a dude or not. You don't have to, but if you do, he leads you to a new location, which then leads you to a second dude, who then gives you a side quest, which then brings you elsewhere to meet new people and kill new bad guys and learn new things about the lore and discover new things about the map that you're in. And yes, I tested it out. If I wanted to, I could have just shot those guys in the face and looted their corpses instead of taking their side quests, which just amazes me, if I'm being honest. And yeah, I know, saying it amazed me sounds pretty dramatic, but again, so many games these days have been poor imitations of games that truly felt open, that felt like you had true freedom, at least to some extent. Like, for example, if you watched my reviews for Dragon Age the Veilguard and Star Wars Outlaws, you'd know I liked those games quite a bit more than the average person. But when it came to the RPG elements of those games, the sense of freedom in those games, it was basically non-existent. But so far, S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 reminds me so much of games of years gone by, when they actually gave the player a true sense of choice. And games weren't just filled with smoke and mirrors, pretending to be something that they weren't. Even when you choose your own dialogue in this game, your dialogue choices feel like they have 1,000 times more impact than any of the dialogue options in Dragon Age the Veilguard or Star Wars Outlaws. But don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to oversell you. Don't let me hype you up too much. This isn't Baldur's Gate 3, a game that I haven't played, but I've been told can feel like an entirely different story, an entirely different experience on each playthrough. It's nothing like that, but compared to so many other AAA games that have been released these past couple years, S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 so far feels way more meaningful than most, and it feels like your choices hold a lot more weight than a lot of other games. But now let's talk about the gameplay. S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 seems to have a little bit of everything. The world is very horrific. Again, there's a lot of horror to it. Mutant monsters that look like something out of Dead Space or the Callisto Protocol. But more often than that, there's a lot of human enemies. So you'll be engaging in your fair share of firefights as well. This game will definitely scratch that action itch if that's what you're mostly looking for in a first-person shooter game. But the pacing, at least so far in my experience, is a lot more methodical, I guess you could say. This isn't Call of Duty. Your finger isn't going to be pulling a trigger 99% of the time. There's a lot of slower moments in this game, a lot of exploration, looting, taking in the ambiance, and just existing in this world. Sometimes, depending on what you're doing and how you choose to play, you can go maybe 30 to 40 minutes without even firing around. And I think S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 does a near perfect job at balancing all of these aspects: the horror, the sci-fi, the action, the mix of main story beats and cinematics, and the narrative moments that you seek out and find yourself by just exploring and doing side quests. This game so far just juggles all of that incredibly well. And that's not even to mention the survival mechanics of this game. You'll have to manage your hunger and your exposure to radiation as well. And stuff like that, in my opinion, can be annoying in a lot of games. I have to be in a very specific mood to want to deal with that sort of stuff, like hunger and thirst, but it didn't annoy me at all here. I actually think it really adds to the experience and the sense of just needing to survive and the constant tension that this game gives you. Also, I really like the guns in this game. They feel distinct and I like looking at them, and I really like how customization works. Finding attachments and being able to take them off or put them on a whim is probably my preferred way of using attachments in FPS games. But anyway, it's time to talk about some of the more negative aspects of S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2, and unfortunately, this is a somewhat rough launch for the game. It doesn't run super smoothly, and that's unfortunate. Sometimes I noticed the frame rates would drop, and it would get a little stuttery at times, but for me, I always stopped noticing it within a few seconds. It's not nearly as bad as, say, Redfall's launch or anything like that. Also, there's a good handful of gameplay bugs. One time I was getting attacked by nothing, and I'm not even talking about those mutant monsters that can turn invisible and you can still see the slight outline of them, kind of like the Predator, but there was just straight up nothing attacking me. There was nothing there at all. And sometimes hit detection isn't 100% accurate either. Like if I were to shoot a bad guy at point blank range 5 times, one of those bullets would just act as if he was translucent. No damage, no animation of him being struck or anything like that. It's pretty clear to me that this game needs a little ironing out, but for me personally, nothing I experienced ruined the game for me. Nothing broke the immersion completely. Nothing had me calling up the store, demanding a refund with balled fists. Nothing like that, but full transparency, I don't know why, but I tend to be a lot less affected by gameplay bugs than most people. There's been so many times in so many different games where I experienced slight bugs, but I was still able to enjoy the game, and then afterwards I would go online and see the game being deemed borderline unplayable by pretty much everybody else. So I think I'm just lucky, so definitely look up other sources, see if people are having worse experiences than me. But just so you're aware and you can compare if you want to, I'm playing a physical copy, if that matters, on a standard Xbox Series X console, but I do recommend turning HDR off. The HDR is pretty jacked in this game and it just looks a lot better without it. So I definitely wait for a patch or two if you're someone whose enjoyment of a game relies heavily on performance. But if you're like me and it's easy for you to overlook a little bit of jank when the game itself is really, really fun, I don't think you'd regret playing the game right now, but maybe at least test it out on Game Pass first before you commit to a $60 purchase. That's what I would have done if I wasn't a hardcore physical collector. But yeah, that's my quick and brief thoughts after playing S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 for the better part of a day. I'm really enjoying it so far. It's genuinely one of the better gaming experiences, but I must say I'm not sure how long this is going to last. It's really going to depend on how fun the side quests remain to be. It's going to depend on how fun exploration is throughout the whole duration, how much variety there is in the map, and of course how good the main story is going forward. But right now I'm really eager to play more and I'm really liking it. And like I said in the beginning of this video, I'm probably going to make a follow-up to this review after I put in a lot more hours. So once again, consider subscribing if you want to check out that video when I release it. And have you played S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 yet? If you have, let me know what you're thinking about it in the comments down below. And if you haven't, let me know. Do you plan to? Are you going to wait for a few patches? Are you going to play it immediately? Or are you going to ignore it completely? Either way, I look forward to hearing your thoughts in the comments down below. And yeah, thank you for watching, especially if you watched this far.
Okay. Is charging always this noisy?
No, but that rock of yours is pretty unusual. Check the scanner quick. Is it charged?
Nope.